What if everything you think you know about death is wrong? What if the end isn't the end? For thousands of years, humans have searched for answers, from the ancient Egyptian belief in the afterlife, to Tibetan teachings about the journey of the soul, to modern-day near-death experiences reported by people who were clinically dead, yet came back with incredible stories. Now, in a twist that sounds more like science fiction than science, researchers are beginning to uncover evidence that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about what happens after we die. For centuries, death was considered an instant, irreversible event. The heart stops, the brain shuts down, and that's it. But modern medicine has changed everything. With advanced resuscitation techniques, powerful drugs, and machines that can keep blood and oxygen flowing artificially, scientists have been able to bring people back from states once thought to be final. And in doing so, they've stumbled upon something extraordinary: reports of vivid, conscious experiences when the body should have been incapable of generating them. These accounts aren't just a few random stories. Thousands of people across different cultures, religions, and backgrounds describe similar phenomena. A sensation of floating above the body, seeing loved ones who have passed away, entering a tunnel of light, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace and unity, and perhaps most intriguing, an encounter with some kind of presence, a being of light, a guide, or even a life review where every moment flashes before your eyes, infused with deep, emotional clarity. Skeptics have long argued that these experiences are simply the brain's last flickers of activity before shutting down, the result of oxygen deprivation or chemical surges. But this explanation is starting to look incomplete. In recent years, studies using EEG and other brain monitoring tools have revealed bursts of complex, organized brain activity after the heart has stopped, sometimes minutes after. These patterns don't match random neural noise. They look more like the brain is processing information, maybe even creating coherent experiences. One groundbreaking study conducted at New York University tracked cardiac arrest patients in real time. The researchers found that up to 40% of survivors reported some form of conscious awareness during the time they were clinically dead. Even more striking, some could recall specific conversations and details from the operating room, details later confirmed by the medical staff. How can someone with no heartbeat and no measurable brain function still perceive, think, and remember? Some scientists are now exploring the idea that consciousness might not be entirely dependent on the physical brain. Instead, the brain could act more like a receiver or a filter, processing and shaping consciousness, but not generating it entirely. When the brain shuts down, consciousness might continue in a different form, much like a radio signal still exists even if the radio is turned off. This concept, once dismissed as mystical thinking, is now gaining cautious attention in serious scientific circles. Quantum physics has added fuel to the fire. The strange behavior of particles at the smallest scales, where they can exist in multiple states at once, become entangled across vast distances, and seem to respond to observation, has led some researchers to wonder if consciousness itself might be a fundamental part of the universe, not just a byproduct of biology. If that's true, then death might simply be a transition, a change in the state of that consciousness, rather than an absolute end. Of course, science moves slowly, and most researchers remain careful not to make claims that can't be proven. But the parallels between ancient spiritual teachings and modern scientific observations are hard to ignore. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes stages of awareness after death that mirror some near-death accounts almost exactly. Ancient Greek philosophers like Plato wrote about the immortality of the soul and journeys beyond the physical world. And now, in hospitals and laboratories, fragments of evidence are hinting that these ancient ideas might hold more truth than we ever imagined. The personal stories are perhaps the most compelling. Take the case of Anita Morjani, who was in a coma, her organs failing, doctors giving her only hours to live. She later described leaving her body, seeing her family gathered at her bedside, and entering a realm of unconditional love and clarity. She claimed she understood why she had become ill and was given a choice: return to her body or continue. She chose to return, and within days, her cancer had dramatically receded, something her doctors could not fully explain. Then, there's the account of Dr. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon who contracted a rare form of meningitis that shut down his brain activity. By every measure, he should have been incapable of conscious thought. Yet he describes an elaborate journey into another reality, filled with vibrant landscapes, music that could be felt as much as heard, and encounters with beings who radiated love. For a man trained to dismiss such experiences as hallucinations, his transformation was profound. He emerged convinced that consciousness survives death. Stories like these are often met with skepticism. Critics argue they could be hallucinations, dreams, or psychological coping mechanisms. But that still leaves unanswered the question of how such vivid, structured experiences can occur when the brain appears to be offline. And when so many accounts share common features, features described by people from vastly different cultures and beliefs, the possibility that something real is happening becomes harder to dismiss. If consciousness does persist after death, even briefly, what does that mean for us now, while we're alive? It could change everything about how we see life's challenges, relationships, and purpose. Fear of death has shaped human behavior for millennia. But what if death isn't an abrupt void? What if it's a doorway? Would you live differently, love more deeply, take more risks if you knew the end wasn't truly the end in the last decade? Researchers have taken the investigation even further, pushing the boundaries of what we can measure at the edge of life. At the University of Michigan, scientists monitored the brain activity of dying patients and observed something astonishing. In the seconds after cardiac arrest, there was a sudden surge of high-frequency brain waves, patterns similar to those seen during heightened states of awareness, memory recall, and intense dreaming. These waves lasted for tens of seconds, far longer than expected, and suggested that the brain might enter a hyperconscious state as it shuts down. But this still doesn't explain how some people report experiences lasting what feels like hours or even days, all within the few minutes that they were clinically dead. Time itself seems to warp during these states. Could this mean that our perception of time is tied entirely to the body, and when freed from it, consciousness experiences something altogether different? In many near-death experiences, the sense of time is replaced by an overwhelming now, a single moment that contains everything. Some researchers point to what's called the continuity of consciousness theory. This proposes that awareness does not flicker out at death, but instead shifts to another plane, dimension, or level of reality. It's not reincarnation in the traditional sense, nor is it tied strictly to any one religion. It's simply the idea that consciousness cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Energy, after all, cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes form. Could the same be true for the mind? The parallels with ancient wisdom traditions are striking. The ancient Egyptians believed the soul embarked on a journey through the underworld, facing trials and tests before reaching the afterlife. Hinduism describes the Atman, the eternal self, that moves from one life to another, learning and evolving along the way. Indigenous cultures speak of the spirit returning to the land, joining the ancestors in an eternal cycle. These weren't random myths. They were humanity's earliest attempts to describe something they may have intuitively known. That life is not confined to the physical body. Modern science, with all its skepticism, is slowly circling back to this possibility. Not because of faith or folklore, but because the data refuses to be ignored. Across hospitals, hospice centers, and laboratories, researchers are collecting testimony after testimony, each adding another piece to a puzzle that spans human history. And while science may never be able to definitively prove life after death in the way we prove gravity, the accumulation of evidence is nudging us toward a radical shift in how we understand reality. Imagine for a moment that this is true. That death is not a wall, but a doorway. How would that change your choices today? Would grudges suddenly seem meaningless? Would fear lose its grip? Would you dare to pursue the life you've always wanted, knowing that your existence stretches far beyond the boundaries of your current body? There's also a humbling aspect to this perspective. If consciousness continues, then our actions, our thoughts, and the love, or lack of it, we bring into the world might echo beyond our physical lives. This idea has been echoed for centuries in spiritual traditions, but now it's being considered in the context of modern ethics and science. If what we do here truly matters beyond death, then every moment carries even more weight. Of course, the mystery remains unsolved. For all our instruments and theories, no one has mapped the afterlife. No one has brought back photographs or definitive proof. And maybe that's how it's meant to be, because the uncertainty keeps us questioning, searching, and living fully in the only place we can be sure of, the present moment. Perhaps the real gift of exploring this question isn't about removing our fear of death, but about deepening our appreciation for life. Knowing, or even suspecting, that this isn't all there is can strip away the illusion that we have endless time to waste. It can make love more urgent, kindness more valuable, and moments of beauty more precious. So what happens after death? Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what will you do with the time you have now, knowing that the story might continue? Will you live in fear, or will you embrace the possibility that you are part of something infinite if you've ever had an experience that made you wonder about life after death? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this video made you think, please give it a like, share it with someone curious about the big questions, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the mysteries of life, mind, and existence. Remember, your journey isn't over yet. It's only just beginning.